So the topic that we moved to put on at a 4-1 vote was to talk about Water for Elephants in this particular intercession that's in question. So one of the questions I wanted to start with is the process by which something like this intercession gets on the calendar. Who initially presents it, who reviews it, and how does it get to this point?
Here it goes.
Good evening, Bill Hagan, Bedford High School principal. Thank you for sticking around for this.
Good evening again. We have a couple of folks in our building that oversee the intercession process, the development of the intercession process, and that's our assistant principal, Bob Jazokis, and Laura Dreyer. Laura is the chair of the intercession committee. The intercession committee is comprised of a group of teachers, and teachers are asked to come up with ideas for intercession and make proposals to this committee. The committee then looks at all of the proposals that are being made, and as you're aware, the board is aware, we did receive some marching orders this past year to revise our intercession activities over last year. One, make some better connections to academic types of learning. Two, create more lower cost intercessions for our kids to participate in. So with those conditions, proposals come in, and this committee looks at those proposals and weighs the merits of each, and then there are decisions made around which intercessions would be run.
So the goal again is better academics, more lower cost intercessions. Who particularly introduced this particular one that we're looking at tonight, Water for Elephants?
There were three teachers that made a proposal for that.
And who were they, just out of curiosity? Is that inappropriate to ask at this point?
Is it necessary?
Just curious. I mean, are they...
It's in your emails. You've seen it. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that Laura and Bob reviewed...
Yes, Laura and Bob, and as well as the committee.
And do we know if the committee, Bob and Laura, actually read the book?
I do not know the answer to that question. I would assume they probably did not. It would not be possible for them to review every single piece of material.
There's 60 intercession choices, right? Is there 60 choices for intercession? 45? Okay, 45. All right.
So is there anything in place that identifies for the committee or for Laura or Bob what would be considered objectionable? Right? So I'm getting to a point here, and I'll get here a little quicker. Well, that's kind of the problem, right? So if, in my opinion, if you have to send home a parent permission slip, that's kind of a red flag in my book. I mean, why?
I completely disagree.
Well, okay, so we agree to disagree. That's okay. So let me read just out of the description, right? Because we're shooting for better academics.
No. Just to clarify,
I'm reading the description on
what
your
the
side.
principal was responding to was the direction the board gave from last year in terms of changes to intercession.
For this year.
Correct.
Right? So this year, better academics would have been classified as one of the points to review before accepting this as a valid offer to the students. Is that fair?
And I would also add, if you recall, that Mr. Jazokis did, at the beginning, when he brought the changes, the document to the board for the board's review, indicated at that point in time, it is still a work in progress. We still do need to make movement more toward academic, that academic connection. And so he did indicate that right at the very start of the school year, that this year's are an improvement over last year's, and we can expect those intercessions to be an improvement next year over this year's.
So would it be fair to say that better academics, to me, says aligned to some standard? Because how else would you define better academics?
Well, I think you have to understand that the purpose of intercession isn't purely about connecting what we're trying to allow kids to experience to an academic core standard someplace. It is an opportunity to provide them with some different type of learning experiences, not just purely the core academic standards. I think that you're
We talked about that back when we approved the overnight ones. We talked about that.
I know, I mean, I had an opinion about zombies, and Bob and I went back and forth about zombies and its relevance, and this is just another example. I think I've got emails that have suggested that we probably ought to tighten up a little bit some of the offerings. So I'm in the intercession catalog where kids come in and sign. That's what I'm going to read out of here for a minute. And I just, this particular one, if it went through this process, then I think the process needs to be greatly tightened. It's very short. The description says, and I'm going to go from the description to the educational objectives, back to the description, back to the educational. So it says, to begin with, the student will read the book Water for Relevance by Sarah Gruen and interpret the realities of circus life depicted. The educational objective, interpret the realities of circus life while reading the novel. Okay, that seems kind of one for one. Not sure there's really objective in there. It's kind of a restatement. They will also view the movie starring Robert Patterson and Reese Witherspoon. They will compare and contrast the novel and the movie and discuss the inconsistencies in the depiction. Exactly the same on the educational objectives. View the movie, compare and contrast, right? Then they come down, the students will then examine the realities of circus life. Come down to the objectives. Examine the circus life during this. I mean, I'm having a hard time looking at this particular one and saying there was a lot of thought put into it. And so that's kind of my bone with this in general, is that we need to get cheaper ones out there. So this is what we're going to do, and then.
And with all due respect, we should have addressed this when we approved intercession 3 months ago.
Well, I don't know that we really read it. I mean, clearly Bob and Laura, who owned the program, didn't even get through everything that was read. So I just think that if we're going to have this out here, we need to tighten it up some.
Thomas, I'd like to take a step back here just for a second. What is your point in discussing this evening? Because, hang on. Our job is to approve the overnight field trips. We had a discussion, we gave further direction, and I gave even further direction on top of what we discussed back in November, right? I don't know if there's an urgency in adding it to the board agenda this evening to discuss the intercession needs to be tightened up again. So if you could frame the discussion for right now, because you said it was going to be brief, I feel like this is...
You said it was time sensitive.
Right,
So,
I feel like this is a runaway train.
This particular book in question,
Okay.
right, I don't think has any academic relevance to what the session was described. I'm having a hard time finding any kind of educational relevance for it.
Okay,
I've read parts of it, not cover to cover. The parts that I've read, I found quite objectionable.
Well, there's about 5 or 6 pages that are quoted there.
Well, there are 5 or 6 pages. I mean, there's some pretty nasty stuff in that book. And for it to go through Bob, Laura, and the committee and come up as something and to suggest that they're going to go view a film that's not even yet rated, right? Not rated yet. And so we're going to have the freshmen and sophomores taking this intercession, good to go, and then it comes out R-rated. I just think that that's probably not good.
all right. So
Good approach.
the fact that you find it objectionable is interesting, but there are parent permission slips that went out. Parents consented to this, and if people find it objectionable, there's a process that's followed to appeal the offering. It doesn't immediately come to the board and we have a debate at the board level. There's a process that's to be followed. If we learn nothing from the last episode, I think it's that.
I'd like to read